Hey, what's going on? I'm Donny Greens, and I'm about to share with you my 5 top mistakes that I've made in the past 5 years of being a microgreens farmer. Not because I want to reduce my credibility as a microgreens farmer, but because I want to share these experiences I had with you. That way you can learn and not make these mistakes along your microgreens journey. And if you stay until the end, I'm actually going to share a big mistake I made with my landlord that resulted in us actually having to go to court. So stay tuned. For the best microgreens content on the internet, subscribe to my channel and ring the bell. That way you get notified when I come out with new microgreens business videos on Tuesdays. So I found this awesome quote by Rita Mae Brown that goes, "Good decisions come from experience, and experience comes from bad decisions." I love this. In order to gain experience, you have to make mistakes along the way and screw up, right? It's kind of just a fact of life and something that we have to go through to learn. And luckily, I've been doing microgreens business for over 5 years now, so I've made a ton of these bad decisions and mistakes. I'm going to share with you now the top 5 mistakes that I've made in the past 5 years so you can avoid them as you grow your microgreens business, giving you a cutting edge. All right, the first big mistake I've made was never automating watering. Watering is something that has to happen every day, so automating this process will save a lot of time over time and therefore a lot of money over time. Aside from simply the money and time saved from having automated watering, it also allows you to have resilience because you don't have to be there watering every single morning. This will give you the opportunity to take a few days off or maybe even take a vacation. Now, I'll mention that I did end up buying all the equipment needed to automate my watering, but I never actually went ahead and built the system. I never took action on this, and I think the main reason for me never taking action is really just the fear of the unknown. I've never messed around with hydroponic equipment, irrigation, pumps. I've been comfortable watering for multiple years, and I think this created an internal mental block in my head because it was something I've never done before. It's always easier to do something once you've at least done it once and you kind of have your head wrapped around it. Doing something for the first time can be very intimidating, it's scary, and I think this is a problem that a lot of people run into. But really, it's not the greatest excuse, and it's really my only excuse for never implementing that system. I had all the stuff, I just never took action on it because I'd never done it before, and that prevented me from doing it and getting it done. So rest assured, as I build out my new farm, I will definitely be implementing automatic watering. Watering is also the most important part of the growing process of growing microgreens, and it's also where I see the most error for microgreens farmers and especially people who are just starting to learn how to grow. Since humans aren't perfect, it's another great reason to automate this part of your business. The opportunity to reduce or even eliminate the human error involved in doing the most important process of the growing cycle is not something to be overlooked. And this is something that I've noticed, clearly. And that's why I'm starting off with this as number 1. And also I have a great example of something that happened at the very end of running my farm in my last space, right before I closed down the farm to move it across town. There was miscommunication that caused a disaster in the farm. Luckily, I was able to fix the disaster, but here's what happened. 2 of my workers had a miscommunication, and the person who usually does watering thought that he didn't have to come in and do watering for the last 3 or 4 days that we had to do watering. So here I am at the very end of the 5-year cycle of growing microgreens every day, wanting to finish off the business on a good note, and then boom, this happens. So the plants weren't watered for 3 days, and this would have never happened if I had implemented the automated watering system. All right, the second mistake I've made in the past 5 years as a microgreens farmer is hiring the wrong people and not firing them faster. People are a lot trickier to deal with than plants, I will admit, and that's all the reason why it's so important to have the right people on your team. This is why people like Gary Vee recommend online to hire fast and fire faster. Now, this is a great line that I've learned to be true over the past years, and It's important to not have an employee that's not right for the job. And even more importantly, you can end up with somebody coming into your business, a new worker, that ruins your company culture and negatively impacts the other workers that may be doing a great job. So there was a point where I had a solid team. It was me, I had my main harvester doing all the harvesting, I had a girl doing delivery driving who was also helping me with social media. And this is exactly when I made the mistake. My business was growing very quickly at exponential rates as COVID was coming on, and I hired somebody who I thought was going to be my farm manager. Well, this person didn't end up working out, and I ended up keeping him around for months. This made my other workers unhappy because they felt like I was favoring him even though he was the new guy and he was less respectful. So I probably shouldn't have hired him in the first place, but nevertheless, I definitely should have hired him much faster. It was a waste of time, waste of money, and it overall damaged the culture and the relationships I had with my workers before he had come along. I will mention that part of the problem here was the fact that I never created a good system for finding new employees and onboarding them. If I had a better system in place for hiring new employees, I would have been in a better position knowing that I could just find another person rather than worrying about the fact that I wouldn't be able to find somebody else. Speaking of systems, the third big mistake that I've made in the past 5 years is not having a good system in place for customer support after onboarding the new customers. I have a great system for bringing on new customers when they sign up, but I don't have a good system for providing them more value in those first days and weeks after they sign up. By implementing something as simple as just like an email sequence that could have told the new customers as they're getting their first deliveries why these crops are so important to eat and a bunch of different ways on how to eat them, I would have been able to increase my customer retention, reducing my customer drop off, and probably would have increased my average weekly order as well of these customers. This coincides with the fact that I never became an avid user or eater of these microgreens for myself, which would have naturally helped me in creating some of this content for my customers. And this is actually why I always recommend that people start growing microgreens for themselves and for their families before they consider doing this as a business. That way they can learn how to use the product and better support their customers. Comment below and tell me one of the mistakes you've made that's really stood out in your life. That way we can all learn from that together and avoid it before it happens to us. It only takes a few seconds of your time to go down there and leave a comment. That way we can all improve from it. Go on, go leave one. The fourth big mistake I've made as a microgreens farmer is never truly and deeply really dialing in my crop cycles. Although I have beautiful, high quality crops that grow consistently for me week after week, these crop cycles could totally be dialed in to make them even more efficient and profitable. I think it's a good idea in general to revisit your crop cycles every time you move into a new grow space because the environment in that grow space will be different and therefore your crops will be growing differently and therefore requiring the need for more optimization. I only did some basic crop testing when I was running my first farm in my parents' basement, and I've actually been using the same crop cycles, the same seeding rates this whole time since then because I got caught up running the business and honestly, probably due to a little bit of laziness as well. But because of that, I'm using more space than I need to most likely and probably making less profits on my products. I'll also mention here that seeds can vary from seed lot to seed lot. So it's also another great time to do some experimentation every time you get a new lot of seeds in because they will potentially be performing differently. Optimizing crop cycles is actually something I'm really excited to do in the future because I only did it in my first farm and not in my second and third. So as I build out my fourth farm, I'm excited to run these experiments and really figure out ideal temperatures and seeding rates and even dial in the crop cycles and change grow times. I can even experiment with different lighting setups. I've traditionally used just one light per shelf. I'm excited to try 2 lights per shelves on these varieties and see if that makes any of a difference. I would imagine that some varieties, maybe like pea, could benefit from 2 lights and maybe even get higher yields and higher profitability. And as far as the grow cycles go, like maybe I can grow broccoli for a whole day less, harvest a day earlier, but still get the same yield and quality. And that would result in me being able to use less space in my farm, using my space more efficiently and having more space on those racks for other crops. I'm daydreaming and digressing a little bit here, but optimization is very important, and I'm excited to make YouTube videos as I do these experiments in a few months, optimizing my business and sharing with you the exact results from these tests, which should make my microgreens business even more optimized and profitable. All right, the 5th and last big mistake I've made in the past 5 years as a microgreens farmer involves my landlord and signing contracts and verbal agreements. I probably should have realized that this guy was a bit off based on some of our initial interactions, but I went ahead and rented the space from him anyway because it was really close, I needed a new space, and it was a very nice space. The real mistake I made here though was in trust. I trusted that this man would do what he said he was gonna do, but in reality, he was a compulsive liar and manipulator. Because of his continuous BS and failing to deliver upon what he promised, I actually stopped paying him at the end of 2021. So I didn't pay him anything in 2022. And now I finally left his building upon his request, obviously, at the end of April in 2022. At this time that I was leaving, he actually did something called an illegal lockout where he prevented me from getting my supplies and equipment out of the building, even though he wanted me to leave. And I actually had to take him to court over this. I'm not lying, I'm being serious. We each got a lawyer and we literally had to go to the courthouse and have a hearing. Luckily, the consensus was in my favor and I was able to get my stuff out of his building and finally leave and get away from this guy. There's a lot to this story and I'm gonna make a whole video on this once the dust has settled a little bit, but I will leave you with this. Have everything in writing when you do a lease agreement. Think of anything and everything that could possibly be needed to have in that agreement, and don't take anything that the landlord says verbally as truth. I consider myself a good person, and I also feel like my honesty and integrity is through the roof. So because of this, I tend to attract people into my life that I can trust. But sometimes a punk will creep in. And that's exactly what happened with this case, and I had to deal with it. And funny enough, I've met a bunch of people who actually grew up with this guy and went to school with him, and they all say the same thing about him, that he was a punk. No big deal though, it was a learning experience and I'm thankful for it because not only did I learn a ton, but I get to share this experience with you on YouTube. That way you don't have to experience the burden of making a bad decision or a mistake like this. And I think that's amazing. So now you know my top 5 mistakes that I've made in the past 5 years of being a microgreens farmer, but what if you want to see me making mistakes in real time? Follow me on Instagram where I can share what I'm doing every day in my stories. I love sharing the mistakes and screw-ups that I make because personally, I just think it's really funny. I've always loved being goofy and laughing at my shortcomings, and it could be a lot of fun for me to tell and also a lot of fun for people to watch. So go follow me on Instagram. My handle is @DonnyGreens. To hear what I'm most proud of in my past 5 years of being a microgreens farmer, click the video below or use the other video to see what supplies and equipment you need to get started. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button below, subscribe to my channel, and share this video with anybody you think it may help. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.